Please welcome this evening's guest moderator, Thelma Adams from Yahoo Movies, and our special guest, John Turturro.
Hi, I'm Thelma, he's John.
Right.
First question I have, having, seen that clip, how did you go about casting all those beautiful women?
Well, initially the whole thing started with the idea that I would like to do something, I thought, with Woody Allen, that we could possibly be an interesting duo together. And then I thought, well, what would be the setting of it?
What would be fun?
And what would be fun? And I had a friend who had a bookstore, he lost it. He's an older Jewish man, and he had a younger African-American girlfriend with all these kids. And I thought, well, Woody could be that guy, and suppose I worked for him, and if I had to reinvent ourselves, in the sex business. And I thought, well, yeah, I kind of like that idea. So then I shared that with my hair cutter, who's Woody's hair cutter. And then Woody really I know he liked me, but he liked the idea. And so then I started talking to him, and I did, and I started writing it, and he would give me his feedback.
So now, had you worked with him before that?
I knew him a little bit. I'd done Hannah and her Sisters, and I made a movie, Company Man, that Doug McGrath directed. He had wanted me for one movie, I couldn't do it, and another movie I didn't get, but I knew I was being considered for the main role, and so I always knew he liked me. But I thought we had enough differences, but enough similarities that we could possibly have good chemistry between us. But after getting to know him during the various drafts of the script, we worked in the theater together, and that really helped.
You had directed the...
I directed these 3 one-acts, relatively speaking. He suggested me. It was him, Ethan Cohen, and Elaine May. And that was quite
Evil
a
question,
bear.
who is the funniest of those 3?
They're all funny in different ways. So, and then by the time I had finished on all the drafts, it had been a couple years. So that really helped to get over my shyness, to direct him. So, but no, the women were not in mind from the beginning. No.
Okay, so what was in mind first was the relationship between
right.
pimp and prostitute, let's say.
Right, or procurer
and okay,
yes.
or
Okay.
we can go through many words.
Whatever, yes.
And you have said that that's in a way a metaphor for acting. Yes, no?
I mean, in some ways. I mean, some of the most famous actresses on stage, 150 years ago, 200 years ago, like Sarah Bernhardt, were courtesans. So I do think there is a performance element, and there is definitely a physical transaction that goes on between the client, and the person servicing the client. I've always been interested in films about streetwalkers. I think I saw one early on. Well, the Fellini film I love. That's one of my favorite films, Nights of Cabiria.
Yeah.
But I love Barbara Stanwyck, and I saw her in a Frank Capra film. I remember Anna Magnani and Mama Rosa, Buñuel's film Belle de Jour. It goes on and on. Never on Sunday by Jules Dassin.
It's interesting. I was talking to Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke about this, and Julie Delpy was talking about how, when they did the last movie that they did together. Now I'm spacing Before Sunrise, After Midnight, whatever the Before Sunrise?
I think it's after midnight. After
Before midnight. Okay,
Before midnight.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it because it's all running around in my head. But she was saying that it's so much different when you've written the role,
right,
and you're having sex on screen than when someone else has written it and you're just there, and that can be very uncomfortable, and that for her could feel like being a prostitute.
When someone else has written the role?
When someone else has written it and is directing it, and she feels she has no control over the situation.
Well, I actually think the scenes that are leading to sex in a movie are much more enjoyable, pleasurable, and much sexier to do than to do a love scene. You do feel very strange, unless it's a great scene and there's a problem in a scene. Because every scene has to have an obstacle. And if it doesn't have an obstacle, then you're just kind of writhing and simulating.
Right.
And it's very, very difficult. Sometimes people ask, I've done scenes where you put on music or you have a drink or whatever. But if you don't really know someone, sometimes I've been with very famous actresses, they're taped because they know that the director wants to see their breast and they don't want to show their breasts. So
Right.
it's to me, it's more like going to the doctor's office or something
Right.
like that, And so I don't find it pleasurable. It's the other scenes that can be really intimate,
The scenes leading to the first kiss.
That's right. That's right. And one of the reasons why I chose like a religious woman in the movie was that she would present, that Vanessa Paradis plays, this big, obstacle in the film because she comes from a restricted community. And it gives you so much more to play because
Right.
there's so much more to go through. And that interested me. And also, if you make a movie about sex, I think you should have religion in it because they are interconnected.
And it's interesting also. So your background is Catholic.
Yes, it is.
Woody Allen's Jewish.
That's right.
And there's a long history in New York of Jews and Catholics cavorting together.
That's right.
Collaborating.
Well, I mean, it was
collaborating.
considered
I meant artistically, but then again,
I mean, originally everyone kind of stayed to their own tribes, so everything was like an intermarriage. Or, I mean, if an Irish woman went out at one time with an Italian guy, it was like an intermarriage.
right,
It was considered, taboo.
right.
So
Or the Yiddish would be Shonda.
yeah, that's right. So it's a whole, there's a lot of guilt that goes all the way around.
We share that anyway.
But I think in
right.
films about if you think about actresses, think about how many actresses have played prostitutes and how many actresses have played nuns. Sometimes the same person
Right.
made a career doing both. So I wanted to kind of reverse that and put the women in the opposite situation.
Right, which is interesting. Let's step back because it's interesting that you cast yourself as this,
Right.
as the lover.
Right. Well, it's all based on,
Your life.
my life story as a gigolo. So I was a gigolo for a long time. Now I admit it. So, I think everyone has, their own sexuality. And when we see movies, it's always represented in a way, it's the ideal, the perfection. It's this beautiful representation. And sometimes it can be the least sexiest representation. Because people who are really innately beautiful sometimes aren't that sexy because they're so used to receiving attention, not giving attention, not holding someone's attention, not giving someone else a chance to kind of bloom and blossom in front of them. And I think everyone knows this. And, sometimes you can see all these different people and you can look at one person who's not perfect looking or whatever, and you say, wow, she has there's something. She has that spark. And that interests me. I remember seeing Woody Allen movies when I was dating, and he was the romantic guy. And I was like, my girlfriends always liked him. And I was always like, well, it was kind of encouraging. I said, well, if they like him, man. I mean, I'm doing pretty well.
I have a chance.
I'm in good shape and everything like that, and I'm bigger than he is. So, but he was very believable that way, and it's something. It's kind of encouraging to see that. When I see, once in a while, there are people who are beautiful and really erotic, and it only happens once in a while, like when you see Marlon Brando, when he actually had both.
Right.
And there were a lot of people who were beautiful, people, and women too, but they didn't have that other quality, like Jean Moreau. Look at Jean Moreau. She's not a beautiful, classic beauty, but man, I mean, I just, been in love with her. I'm still in love with her.
Right.
So.
She'll be in your next movie.
Yeah, sure. Right.
She'll be in
with
the movie
Julie Christie.
With Julie Christie.
Julie Christie and Jean Moreau. That's
Right.
my fantasy.
That's
my real
menage a
fantasy.
trois.
So,
I remember the night that I was at the New York Film Critics Circle and we gave an award to Julie Christie. And,
Right.
New York Film Critics Circle is, 90% men.
Right.
In a good year. Otherwise, it's 95. And the year we had Julie Christie come,
Right.
I've never seen so many men kind of lose their ability to speak.
Well, because she was like a real fantasy, woman from Darling on to Dr. Zhivago, all the way up
Altman,
into,
yeah.
Shampoo. which was an influence actually on me for this film. I really loved
That's interesting.
the tone of Shampoo. And I just liked, even though he was a hair cutter, he also kind of serviced everyone, and they also took advantage of him in some ways. And it was interesting when I went to find the perfect wig for Vanessa Paradis' character. I said, give me your Rolls Royce wig. And they brought this wig up. She wasn't in the shop, and
it's a Julie Christie.
And it looked like Julie Christie's hair and shampoo. And then I thought, it's probably not going to fit her well. It's not going to look right. But when she put that wig on, I was like overjoyed, because I said, wow, she looks beautiful in it. It reminds me of like Joan of Arc, and it also reminds me of Julie Christie in Shampoo. And you know, that was an important element in the film. The wrong wig, or a wig without highlights, that you know immediately, could really just sink a film very easily. And I wanted the film to have a kind of palpable, you know, beauty, like those Saul Leader photographs that I used for inspiration.
Right.
So.
Do you want to? Should we show the first clip? You're so sexy in that scene.
Oh, thanks. Well, you know, we were thinking that, you know, because the whole scene is, then she sits down and she starts to talk about, then they're watching vintage basketball and guys in those short shorts, and how she liked guys in short shorts, and we get to know her like little by little. And I thought, you know, either we're going to show a big sex scene, or they're going to get to know each other, you know, physically, by her just saying, okay, let me see if you can move. And Sophia and I just decided, I said, listen, I don't want to choreograph it. No choreography. Let's just see what happens and see if we get something going between us. And we can do various takes. And some takes, a lot of that was from the first take. You know, we were really kind of feeling each other out. And then other takes, then we got too used to each other, and it wasn't as good, or we bumped into each other. And I thought that's the way that people get to know each other. And the character that I play is like a physical man. He's comfortable in his body, but he's quiet with words. And I thought that would be appropriate. So,
I want to go back and something that we were talking about in the green room, that the kernel of the idea was not these two guys who start a business, but
my first idea was they were trying to get out of business, but they had got into it the same way, and that their clients were getting older. And Woody thought that was interesting, but didn't maybe have as much legs as beginning from the beginning. So, you know, originally I was thinking about all these different older women, and one idea I did have was to have, because I'm good friends with Elaine Stritch. And I know that Elaine used to always go to confession after. And I thought of her as an 80-year-old retired nun who was a virgin and wanted to have sex, you know, before she died. And then she did, and you don't really see it. You see her going to get ready, and then when she looks up, she's 25 years old again. And then it cuts to after sex, really, after the young girl gets in bed. And she's very, very disappointed. This is because, you know, she's never done it before, you know, and the guys. So it was this image of this woman who was this religious woman. And then that actually kind of developed into the Avogal character in a different way. But
and that's the Avogal character is the one that Vanessa Paradis plays.
She plays an acidic widow, that's right. And Liev Schreiber is
jonesing for her.
Yeah, he's in love with her, and he's the head of the patrol that they have called the Shamrim, but he just doesn't know how to talk to a woman because he grew up they grow up very separated. So, but a lot of these women in these religious communities, they're never ever courted; they're just given. So they've never had that experience. So I thought that would be something interesting, and also to take characters like Sharon Stone's character, who doesn't really have to pay for sex, but wants to have sex because she has an unhappy marriage with someone, but she wants no strings attached, but she's never done that before, so she doesn't know how to do it. And I wanted to put these people who had enough life experience in situations that were brand new, and they would kind of thrust them into being in high school all over again. And this happens throughout life because people break up, people die, they get divorced, people lose their jobs, and they have to reinvent themselves. And you wind up in this situation, you're saying, I'm a certain age, and now I have to start all over again. And I thought that could be interesting.
And I think that Sharon Stone pulls it off.
Yeah, no. Yeah, she's very
Vulnerable,
right. And I think she actually is. I mean, it's very hard to be an actress. Much harder than being an actor, which is hard, but nowhere
Why
near.
is that? Why don't you talk about
Because
that?
women are judged in a very different way. They also, the parts just start disappearing after they're 35. I think, you look at movies, most movies, it's like one or two, one young woman and 25 guys with pumped up arms, trying to save the world. It's just all, it's a bunch of bullshit. It's like, it's like the world, that's not the world. The most powerful influence in the world usually comes from a female influence on men and women. And yet in movies, you don't ever explore, people don't explore, the feminine position, and influence and power. And also, it's you get these actresses who are ripe. They have all this experience, and they can bring that to them. And I think all the actresses do a wonderful job in the film. I'm interested in women, and I like to be able to put them in a position where they're not imitating a man.
Right.
And I'm married. I was close to my mom. I'm a son. I have a lot of women friends, and I listen. And I see, what goes on. So I tried to capture a little of that.
And now we're going to run with the second clip.
Okay.
Even though I'd love to, we'll continue talking about this
Okay.
in a minute, because we have a clip with Woody Allen, a comic clip with
Okay.
him and Liev Schreiber.
Okay.
And what he's doing is making her smile.
Yeah, he's making her, the other guy's making her happy, and the other guy, doesn't understand that at all. And he comes to understand it a little bit.
Now, with working with Woody Allen, he keeps claiming that no one has asked him to be in a movie.
Well, not that many people have. I think people are really intimidated by Woody. And, he did The Front. As far as big role, he's done
Right.
a couple of cameos
Right.
throughout the years. He did scenes from a mall. And, he was excited when I approached him with the idea. And I know he liked my work a lot. And he just wanted to be in something that had nuance and that was sophisticated. And, once he was on the set and I got over my shyness in about an hour, he was a prince to work with. And he's a wonderful actor. He's one of those comic actors who can actually, he has gravitas. He can hold the screen. There are a lot of comic actors, they're not good on a big screen. They're okay on television, but they can't, hold the screen. He's been the romantic guy. He's done the broad stuff. He's also, can be serious. He's really a really wonderful actor. And when you act opposite of him, you realize like, oh, wow, this guy's good, man. He's really good. And he has that, he's still a musician and he was a stand-up comic. But I tell you, I've worked with a lot of comic actors, and there are some good ones. There are some people who have some kind of gravitas, but Woody is really, he's really unique.
Can you give me an example of a scene that you did together, like remembering?
He's just, he's very alive in the moment. He can play the moment. He doesn't always have to make a joke out of it. He can also be vulnerable, and he can be serious, And many times I said, listen, be a little more delicate here, or, there's a whole scene in a trial. I say, and this is a serious moment because you could really, you could get hurt or something.
Right.
And he can play it, perfectly. People want to laugh when they see him. But you forget how there are many performances that he's given over the years that he really has, he brings a pathos to it.
Right.
If you look at Broadway Danny Rose, there's some very tender moments. And I think in the movie you can see that he really cares, even though he's pushing me to do something, not completely, in an altruistic
Right.
means. He there's an affection that he has for me and I have for him. And you definitely
right.
see it. And,
Because he's using you, you're using him,
Yeah,
but
but
life
we're-
is,
but-
there's an exchange.
Yeah, but we're friends, and there's something more than that there. So it was a privilege to get to work with him, and everyone else felt the same way too. But I think people maybe they say, well, he does his own thing, and he won't do something with me, and so I mean, I work with him again in a second.
Do
And
you
we
see-
we really liked working together.
Do you have ideas for that
I
thing?
have something, but I haven't talked to him about. Yeah.
Yeah, so you don't want him
but
to
I'd
hear
like
it
to
on
make a
ET,
movie
yeah.
one day about because he plays jazz. My uncles were jazz musicians, so I'd love to make a movie about jazz, but not one of these tragic things about them shooting up and dying.
Oh, I hate that
and
arc.
triumphing at the end. Oh my God! Just please, I just
Right.
about how these people live, breathe, and are married to their music. And I had uncles. They had wives all over the country. You know what I mean? And they were always happy, but they were always in trouble. But they were musicians.
Right.
You know what I mean? And but people who never made it. And those things are much.
But that
much more
life is interesting. I
It's
mean,
an
it's
interesting life.
right. It's not the star; it's the people who are the journeymen.
It's the sidemen. That's
Right.
It's the sidemen who keep it going.
Which is, yeah, and this week is kind of sad, if it's exactly this week, the death of Roseland Ballroom.
That's right. So
Because a
it's-
lot of those guys, my grandmother danced at Roseland
oh, yeah,
Ballroom.
that's right.
Don't tell anybody she picked up men at Roseland. I mean, like,
well, that's how people picked up people.
Right.
By dancing together. So, but I mean, so I'm a big jazz fan, and I like all kinds of jazz. So yeah, I really liked working with him because he was very professional. When he worked with Vanessa in the beginning, Vanessa Paradis and him, I could see how he had very good chemistry with her and all the kids, and he was excellent on camera and off. And I was able to do the movie within 6 weeks plus because of Woody, and Vanessa too, they were very fast. And then I brought everyone else in after them.
And what's it like directing yourself? I mean,
Sometimes it's as Woody goes, there's one less person to talk to. He goes, and sometimes that's exactly right.
Right.
There's one less person to talk to, and sometimes it's a little schizophrenic. If your schedule is tight, the pressure of the schedule can get to you, and then you're supposed to be relaxed in a scene, and you look tired and tense. So that's a problem sometimes.
So you have to firewall it.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to take a walk. My cinematographer, Marco Pontecorvo, knew me very well, and he would tell me that. And sometimes, it depends who you're acting with. I would go to the playback when I needed it, but I didn't use it very often. I did not use it very often. So it's about having time. Movies, you're trying to capture something within a very limited time frame, unless you have a ton of money. And the more gentle the film and the more, intelligent the film is, the less time you have. That's how it is nowadays. That's how it.
That's the
and you have to
tragedy
make
of
it,
today.
Yeah, and you have to make it seem as if you have as much money as another film has. So you have to be very, very definitive in your choices and what you shoot and how you shoot it. I mean, we shot this film on film, not on digital, because I thought it just was a more sensual medium. It's a more liquid medium.
I'm going to pause here, and we're going to go to the Q&A.
Hi.
Hi.
You've worked with a lot of directors who presumably all work in different ways, so I was wondering which director that you've worked with you sort of find yourself behaving like or emulating in terms of how you...
I don't emulate anybody, but I take from a lot of good directors and wonderful directors that I've worked with. In some of the things I'm saying, creating an environment, being relaxed, being prepared. Some directors play music. I play music a lot. Sometimes I'll play music to help someone emotionally, get them in the head. I'll ask them what they want. I'll put it in their ear. I work with a great Italian director, Francesco Rosi, who, he was a master compositionally and would show you these things compositionally that were so, it was like entering into a Rembrandt painting or something, and it was also emotional at the same time. So you take from that, or from Peter Weir, who liked it to be very loosey-goosey, yet he knew exactly what he was going to go for. And I just think, in the end, you can't emulate anyone. because your personality is revealed very quickly. And if you like people, if you're sensitive to people, if you're responsible to how much time you have, people pick up on that, and they know right away. And if someone, you can have a key grip, or a dolly grip, make a good suggestion, if the situation is relaxed enough, and in a respectful way. But I've worked with directors who think they're, Patton, they think it's, and I don't like that. And and it doesn't get the best out of me. And then I try to figure out, sometimes I do more acting with those directors off camera than I do on camera. So, but you have to kind of figure it out and take from different things and then say, okay, in the end, it's your gut, it's your instinct that's going to, make that decision.
I'm a Japanese, so I love Ron Howard's Gun Ho.
Oh.
Yeah. Then how was making movie with Japanese people?
It was good. I enjoyed making it. Well, I'm a big, like when I did this film, I watched a lot of Mitsuguchi films. I'm a big, and I'm a huge Kurosawa freak. And one of my favorite actors of all time, I put him up there with Marlon Brando, is Mifune, Toshio Mifune. I mean, I consider him like, he's a hero of mine. I really mean that, so.
Hattie.
Hattie.
Testing. So you wrote this knowing that you would be playing this part, and that's a really vulnerable process. Do you feel like you wrote anything into your character that was actually a challenge, or did you try to stay comfortable to what you knew?
I did both. I used a couple elements of myself, my being comfortable with women, for example. I have a lot of women friends. I share a workspace with a dear friend of mine. My mom used to make dresses. I used to, cut the patterns with her and everything. So, but then I drew on other people that I knew. So to not only to make it a challenge that I thought would make it more interesting character, a person who's a little more isolated in life, a little bit more like almost of a samurai, even though he works in a flower shop. I have a friend who's very, very talented, but he's not ambitious. And he can do anything. He can take an engine apart. He can cook a meal. He can fix a fixture, your plumbing. And you watch him, and you're like, wow, this person is, and he's really smart. But he stays, he's a quiet person. And I thought, wow, imagine if he was in this situation, in a way. And then I have another person who's had a series of relationships. And I've always become friends with his girlfriends, and then they never last. And I always think like, well, why? Why does it not one ever last? And there's something a little wounded about him, like I think because his family situation was one that he doesn't want to ever repeat, I guess. And that's what happens to people. So I did separate, and it was hard at times to find the right, lightness and not make it too heavy too, the right sort of tender line to play. Because I wanted the guy to be like a confident person, but not cocky, not thinking about the result of getting to home base or making a lot of money, but just kind of being in the moment. And it was actually, sometimes I knew I was in the zone, and sometimes I was like, wow, I'm still, even though I wrote it, I'm still finding my way. So.
How did you develop the voice for Francesco Bernoulli? What was your experience like, and what was it like working with John Lasseter and the rest of the Pixar crew? And what is Cars 3 going to be like from your point of view?
I'm not in Cars 3. I liked working with John Lasseter. He was very, very specific. They show you the drawings. They show you everything. And I tried various different voices, and then I kind of based it on a friend of mine who I imitated for John, and John liked that. And tried to add a little Italian. He's a guy who was my first distributor for Mac, so I used that. But I enjoyed it.
Hi.
Hi.
What was one of the most difficult obstacles of the movie?
The difficult obstacle of making any movie is time. So you got to prepare. I prepared visually, the palette, the costumes, everything. Trying to get the actors to come in. Woody knew it. Vanessa came in, early. Did a lot of research. Liev did some stuff too. Sharon came in later. So you really have to make sure you're really prepared. So things are going to happen, like Hurricane Sandy, which happened, which shut us down. But it's the hardest thing is time. And if you only have 32 days, and one of them a second unit, or two of them a second unit, you have to, if you lose one day, you've lost a big part of the movie sometimes. So you have to kind of imagine that you have more time than you do, but you have to understand how the day is progressing. You're always under the gun that way, and you got to try to stay relaxed. And sometimes you can, and sometimes you can't, because one person can hijack the whole day. Can be the cinematographer, which Marco Pontecorvo never was. Can be an actor, an actress, who's insecure. So that's that's the hardest thing to do. And then create a situation where life can go on, where you can actually capture something. And that's not, you can make believe, but when it really happens in a scene, you're really lucky to capture that. And you have to know when that is. So that's the hardest thing.
It's a high wire act.
It's a high wire act, that's right. If you have 10 weeks, you go, okay, if today doesn't work, we come back tomorrow, we'll do it again, or we'll do it next week. But if I have this location, I have this actor, and that's it, but you have to be very careful about not forcing things, but setting up the situation if what you're going for is human. And if there's something very tender or fragile, that's the hardest thing to do, because it's hard to act that. That has to occur.
And so, since we're concluding, I want to say this is a very sweet and human and funny movie, and please go see it on Friday.
Okay, thank you.
And tell your friends.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much.
There's a problem in a scene, because every scene has to have an obstacle. And if it doesn't have an obstacle, then you're just kind of writhing and simulating.
Right.
And it's very, very difficult. Sometimes people ask, I've done scenes where you put on music or you have a drink or whatever. But if you don't really know someone, sometimes I've been with very famous actresses, they're taped because they know that the director wants to see their breasts and they don't want to show their breasts. So
Right.
it's to me, it's more like going to the doctor's office or something
Right.
like that, And so I don't find it pleasurable. It's the other scenes that can be really intimate,
The scenes leading to the first kiss.
That's right. That's right. And one of the reasons why I chose like a religious woman in the movie was that she would present, that Vanessa Paradis plays, this big, obstacle in the film, because she comes from a restricted community, and it gives you so much more to play. Because
Right.
there's so much more to go through, and that interested me. And also, if you make a movie about sex, I think you should have religion in it, because they are interconnect from the beginning. No.
Okay, so what was in mind first was the relationship between
Right.
pimp and prostitute, let's say.
Or procurer.
Procurer
hooker.
and okay,
Yeah,
or
okay.
we can go through many
Hoe,
words.
whatever.
Hoe.
Yes.
And you have said that that's in a way a metaphor for acting. Yes, no.
I mean, in some ways. I mean, some of the most famous actresses on stage, 150 years ago, 200 years ago, like Sarah Bernhardt, were courtesans. So I do think there is a performance element, and there is definitely a physical transaction that goes on between the client, and the person servicing the client. I've always been interested in films about streetwalkers. I think I saw one early on. Well, the Fellini film I love. That's one of my favorite films, Nights of Cabiria.
Yeah.
But I love Barbara Stanwyck, and I saw her in a Frank Capra film. I remember Anna Magnani and Mama Rosa. Buñuel's film Belle de Jour. It goes on and on. Never on Sunday by Jules Dassin.
It's interesting. I was talking to Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke about this, and Julie Delpy was talking about how when they did the last movie that they did together. Now I'm spacing Before Sunrise, After Midnight, whatever the before sunrise.
I think it's after midnight. After
Before
midnight.
midnight. Okay,
Before midnight.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it because it's all running around in my head. But she was saying that it's so much different when you've written the role,
Right.
and you're having sex on screen than when someone else has written it and you're just there, and that can be very uncomfortable, and that for her could feel like being a prostitute.
When someone else has written the role?
When someone else has written it and is directing it, and she feels she has no control over the situation.
Well, I actually think the scenes that are leading to sex in a movie are much more enjoyable, pleasurable, and much sexier to do than to do a love scene. You do feel very strange, unless it's a great scene. And then I started talking to him, and I did, and I started writing it, and he would give me his feedback.
So now, had you worked with him before that?
I knew him a little bit. I'd done Hannah and her Sisters, and I made a movie, Company Man, that Doug McGrath directed. He had wanted me for one movie, I couldn't do it, and another movie I didn't get, but I knew I was being considered for the main role, and so I always knew he liked me. But I thought we had enough differences but enough similarities that we could possibly have good chemistry between us. But after getting to know him during the various drafts of the script, we worked in the theater together, and that really helped.
You had directed the...
I directed these 3 one-acts, relatively speaking. He suggested me. It was him, Ethan Cohen, and Elaine May. And that was quite
Evil
a
question,
bear.
who is the funniest of those 3?
They're all funny in different ways. So, and then by the time I had finished on all the drafts, it had been a couple years. So that really helped to get over my shyness, to direct him. So, but no, the women were not in mind.
Please welcome this evening's guest moderator, Thelma Adams from Yahoo Movies, and our special guest, John Turturro.
Hi, I'm Thelma, he's John.
Right.
First question I have, having, seen that clip, how did you go about casting all those beautiful women?
Well, initially the whole thing started with the idea that I would like to do something, I thought, with Woody Allen, that we could possibly be an interesting duo together. And then I thought, well, what would be the setting of it?
What would be fun?
And what would be fun? And I had a friend who had a bookstore, he lost it. He's an older Jewish man, and he had a younger African-American girlfriend with all these kids. And I thought, well, Woody could be that guy, and suppose I worked for him, and if I had to reinvent ourselves, in the sex business. And I thought, well, yeah, I kind of like that idea. So then I shared that with my hair cutter, who's Woody's hair cutter. And then Woody really I know he liked me, but he liked the idea. And so